Member for Wallandilly.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. My question's to the Premier. Premier, speaking to your ministry like those of the past, it seems like a game of pass the parcel. I speak to planning who passes queries about growth areas and delivery to education, who passes the bus service provision to transport. In areas of growth, we have no infrastructure and this is not sustainable. Premier, what are your plans to break down the silos between the government departments?
Good question.
Premier.
I'm not going to pass that question off, Mr Speaker. It's a fair enough question. I want to make it clear, Mr Speaker, that in the first instance, of course, my door is always open to members of Parliament, particularly from fast-growing Western Sydney communities, and that includes the member for Wallandilly. And if there are concerns about budget allocations, ensuring that government departments are talking with one another and that there is infrastructure for fast-growing parts of Sydney, I would expect you to be knocking down my door, and of course it's my responsibility to meet you and look at those issues. I would say that the government has committed $109 million over 4 years for the Picton Road upgrade. Now that's funded by the state and the Commonwealth Government. $12 million this year for stage 2 of the Bowral and District Hospital redevelopment, and that includes a state-of-the-art inpatient centre in the old administration building, and of course additional health services in Macarthur and Campbelltown, which is in that region, and I know that region is shared by probably health services in Wollongong, the Bowral district, and then in the Southern Highlands as well as the Macarthur region. So the government is committed to putting infrastructure in that community. We believe it is important, and the plans for fast-growing Western Sydney communities do involve enabling infrastructure that keep pace with growing housing needs. And that's particularly important when it comes to infrastructure charges. And I know the Minister for Planning executed and delivered changes to enabling infrastructure, particularly for Western Sydney, precisely to allow for infrastructure. And it was opposed by those opposite. And so, look, I appreciate that people come into this House and demand their area deserves and needs their fair share of infrastructure, but that's not going to happen unless we can identify sustainable ways of paying for it. Now, the government has done that with those infrastructure charges. The opposition have opposed all of those revenue measures while at the same time demanding massive increases in new spending in their areas, while at the same time opposing any kind of urban consolidation. And you've got an absurd situation where the member for Vaucluse is attempting to preserve derelict car parks, derelict service stations, because that's the unique character of the Vaucluse electorate. What?
It's 129. We've drifted completely away from the relevance of the question that was asked. We're in Vaucluse now.
I thank the member for Dubbo. I uphold the point of order, but the Premier will now proceed.
I don't want to canvass your ruling, but part of infrastructure in fast-growing communities is having an even spread or a fair spread of population growth. And part of that includes...
Member for Wallandilly? Member for Wallandilly is seeking additional information. 2 minutes is granted.
Well, mate, with respect to the member, it's question time, not answer time. And fair enough. So I just want to make this point, Mr. Speaker, that these enabling works are important. We need to make sure the infrastructure
members of the opposition will now.
That urban consolidation
members of the opposition will come to order. I'll start putting people on a call.
I just want to make it clear that the government has a balanced plan when it comes to urban growth in New South Wales and Sydney in particular, and that doesn't involve lumping fast-growing Western Sydney communities with everybody's obligation to take more housing. And that is as essential as the infrastructure questions for fast-growing communities, because if we just say that Sydney's going to grow every other week with another street on the western fringe of Sydney, where is the infrastructure money going to come from? And so the repeated refusal to accept even your fair share of infrastructure from the Liberal Party, the party of the NIMBY, is shocking when you consider the next generation of young Australians who want to have their say. As the member for planning Minister for Planning has just pointed out, 14 apartments is now verboten and outrageous, even for the community of Vaucluse.
Member for
This is
Dubbo rises
completely
on point of
unsustainable in a modern city. We need to do better. It's a law. I'm going to keep going.
I'll stop the clock then. I'll stop the clock, but we need to hear the point of order. We need to apply the standing orders.
The member asked for more. The member asked for more information about the silos. He hasn't actually discussed at any point breaking down the silos. I think the member actually has a right to hear that.
I thank the member for Dubbo for acting on behalf of the member for Wallandilly, but she's quite capable of dealing with that herself. And I'm satisfied that the Premier is answering the question in accordance with how the member for Wallandilly was seeking the question. Member for Goulburn's on a call. Premier, you haven't concluded, have you? Really? After that, I thought you wanted to use that 30 seconds.